My brother said it as casually as if he were asking me to pass the salt. You should just pay for my kids without making me ask. The entire table fell silent. I slowly set down my fork, looked him straight in the eye and replied, "Did my name suddenly appear on their birth certificates? My name is Harper Vance." At 32 I had learned one painful lesson. If you aren't careful, family can turn love into a lifelong bill. We were gathered in my mother's dining room beneath the old brass chandelier that had witnessed every birthday, holiday, dinner, funeral, and forced apology our family had ever shared. Caleb, my older brother, didn't smile. His wife, Marissa, stared into her wine glass, pretending she wasn't part of the conversation. Their 2 children were in the living room watching cartoons through the streaming account I still paid for because Caleb had never bothered to create his own. Mom nervously pressed a napkin against her lips. "Harper," she said softly, warning me to let it go. But Caleb leaned back in his chair, looking offended, as though I had embarrassed him instead of exposing his entitlement. Then he reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a folded sheet of paper and slid it across the table. "Fine," he said calmly. "Then explain this." The paper stopped between us. No one moved. "Go ahead," Caleb urged. I unfolded it. At first it looked like an ordinary bank statement. Then I noticed my name, and a transfer that made my heart skip. $20,000. Mom looked confused. Marissa suddenly looked nervous. I checked the date. The transfer had been made 3 months earlier from an account I rarely used anymore. "What exactly is this supposed to prove?" I asked. Caleb gave a cold laugh. "That money was supposed to help my family." My chair scraped across the floor as I stood. "Supposed to?" I repeated. "Who said that?" The room became silent again. Dad had been gone for nearly 4 years and no one liked bringing him into family arguments. I looked closer at the statement. The transfer hadn't gone into Caleb's personal account. It had gone to a charitable foundation I had quietly created after Dad passed away. "You're reaching," I said. Caleb's expression hardened. "No," he replied. "You made a promise while Dad was dying." His words hit harder than I expected. Suddenly I was back in that hospital room. I remembered holding Dad's hand as he struggled to breathe. I remembered making him a promise. But it wasn't the promise Caleb was claiming. Without another word, Caleb pulled out his phone. "I recorded it," he said. For the first time that evening, I felt a knot of fear tighten in my stomach. He placed the phone on the table like evidence in a courtroom. Mom immediately shook her head. "Caleb, don't do this." He ignored her. A burst of static filled the room. The soft beeping of hospital machines echoed in the background. Then Dad's voice came through. Weak. Fragile. Unmistakable. My chest tightened. I hadn't heard his voice in years. He struggled through a few words before my own voice answered him. The room seemed to close in around me. I remembered spending countless days beside Dad's hospital bed while Caleb only showed up when the nurses called with updates. The recording continued. Dad spoke about family. About responsibility. About taking care of the people we love. Then the audio suddenly stopped. Caleb folded his arms with a satisfied smile. "There," he said. Mom frowned. "That proves nothing." "It proves everything," Caleb insisted. I slowly shook my head. "No," I said quietly. "Because that's not the whole conversation." For the first time all evening his confidence slipped. Only for a moment. But I saw it. Marissa saw it too. Dad had talked with me for nearly 40 minutes that day. The recording Caleb played lasted less than 2. It wasn't the full truth. It was only the part he wanted everyone to hear. Caleb leaned forward, waiting for my next move. "Everyone has heard enough," I said. "Now play the rest." Caleb's jaw tightened. Mom looked back and forth between us as the silence stretched across the room. Finally, Caleb grabbed his phone. "There is no rest." I knew he was lying. Not because I guessed, but because I knew something he didn't. That conversation had been recorded twice. And the second recording wasn't in his possession. I held his gaze. He looked completely confident, unaware that his story was about to fall apart. "The rest exists," I said. His expression darkened. "Then where is it?" Without answering, I reached into my purse. Mom's eyes widened. Marissa held her breath. Inside my wallet was an old business card from my father's attorney. The card itself wasn't important. The memory behind it was. During his final months, Dad insisted that every important conversation about his estate be documented. It wasn't because he didn't trust me. He simply knew that grief and money could tear families apart. Caleb laughed bitterly. You're making excuses. No. I placed the business card beside my plate. Dad's attorney has the complete recording. The color drained from Caleb's face. Mom blinked in disbelief. You mean Richard kept copies of everything? I nodded. Every important discussion about Dad's estate was archived at his request. Caleb shot to his feet. That doesn't prove anything. But his voice cracked. For the first time that evening, panic replaced confidence. Then Marissa did something none of us expected. She looked directly at me. Harper, tell them what happened the week before your father died. Caleb spun toward her. Marissa. His warning was quiet but desperate. She ignored him. Tears filled her eyes, and I realized she had been carrying a secret for years. Her hands shook as she gripped her wine glass. Mom sat perfectly still. Even the cartoons playing in the next room seemed to disappear as every eye turned toward Marissa. The week before your father died, she said softly, Caleb asked him for money. Mom gasped. Caleb slammed his hand onto the table. Stop. But Marissa kept going. He said the business was struggling. A chill ran through me. Dad had already entered hospice care by then. Even speaking for a few minutes exhausted him. Marissa wiped away a tear. Your father refused. No one interrupted. No one even moved. He told Caleb the estate wasn't a rescue fund. Caleb's breathing grew uneven. Marissa looked at me. After that meeting, he was furious. Her words unlocked a memory. Dad had once told me he was disappointed in someone during his final days. He never said who. Now I finally understood. Caleb shoved his chair backward. That's not what happened. But the confidence in his voice was gone. Then Marissa spoke the sentence that destroyed what little defense he had left. He wasn't just asking for money. She swallowed hard. He wanted your father to change the will. The words settled over the room like shattered glass. Mom looked as though she might faint. I had never seen her so pale. Caleb stood frozen beside his chair, caught between anger and fear. That's a lie, he muttered. His voice was barely above a whisper. Marissa slowly shook her head. No. For years I had believed she stayed quiet because she hated confrontation. Now I realized she had simply been carrying the weight of the truth. He wanted your father to reduce Harper's inheritance. Mom covered her mouth. Strangely, I didn't feel angry. I felt relieved. Everything finally made sense. The resentment. The entitlement. The constant expectation that I should pay for his life. It hadn't started after Dad died. It had started long before. Caleb pointed a trembling finger at me. You've always thought you were better than everyone. I let out a quiet laugh. The accusation sounded more desperate than convincing. I paid my own student loans, I said. Caleb's expression tightened. I built my own company. He looked away. And I never asked Dad to bail me out. The truth hit harder than any insult ever could. Marissa lowered her head. Your father refused because he believed Harper earned everything she had. Caleb grabbed his car keys, but the confidence he'd carried all evening was gone. Then Mom spoke. Not loudly. Not angrily. Just firmly. Sit down. For the first time in our lives, Caleb obeyed. And somehow that frightened him more than any argument. He slowly sat back in his chair. The silence that followed was heavier than anything that had been said before. Mom folded her hands neatly on the table. She wasn't trembling anymore. That scared me. Growing up, she had always avoided conflict. She made excuses, kept the peace, and protected everyone's feelings. The woman sitting across from Caleb now was different. She looked older. Stronger. Clearer. 12 years, she said quietly. Caleb kept staring at the table. For 12 years I've defended you. He didn't respond. I convinced myself you were struggling. Her voice never wavered. I told myself you just needed support. A single tear rolled down her cheek. But you weren't asking for help. Caleb swallowed hard. Mom. No. One word stopped him instantly. You were demanding loyalty you never earned. His shoulders slumped. Not dramatically. Just enough to show that deep down he knew she was right. Mom turned toward me. The sadness in her eyes hurt far more than anything Caleb had said. Harper, how much have you given him over the years? I paused before answering honestly. A little over $200,000. The room went completely still. Even Marissa looked shocked. Mom slowly closed her eyes. Caleb looked up, but I didn't see guilt on his face. I saw calculation. Then he opened his mouth and destroyed the last bit of trust anyone still had in him. Then what's another 20,000? No one answered. His words hung over the table, revealing the truth more clearly than anything else that night. Mom stared at him as if she were looking at a stranger. Marissa quietly wiped away tears. As for me, I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt relieved. There was no misunderstanding. No confusion. No hidden reason waiting to explain his behavior. Caleb truly believed he was entitled to everything I had worked for. Mom slowly stood. Give me your house key. Caleb frowned. What? The key. The color disappeared from his face. The small rental house he lived in belonged to Mom. For years she had charged him almost nothing. Mom? Seriously? She held out her hand. I will not support someone who mistakes generosity for obligation. This time no one defended him. Not even Marissa. After a long pause, Caleb pulled the key from his pocket and placed it in Mom's hand. The soft clink against her palm echoed through the silent room. Sounded like the end of a chapter. Like consequences finally arriving. I picked up my purse and headed toward the door. Before leaving, I looked back at my brother. I love your children, I said gently. But being their aunt never made me responsible for raising or supporting them. Caleb lowered his eyes. For the first time all night, he had nothing to say. And somehow, that silence became the only inheritance he had truly earned.